Breakable program.
The Devil May Cry series is almost universally loved by gamers. The characters are fun, the combat is flashy and volatile, and the storyline is so over the top that it practically completely excuses all of the weird stuff they have in the game. The newest installment of the series is Devil May Cry 5, taking place several years after the last game in the series. However, this review will focus primarily on the events that occur in this installment of the game. Anyone familiar with the Devil May Cry series is familiar with the unique flair and style this game is embodied by. Its sheer over-the-top madness is overwhelmingly charming and is a staple of the series. Every aspect of this game, from its combat, to its menus, to its music, to its enemies, everything is polished and artful and badass. This game has style in every sense of the word, and it expects you to have style too, but we'll get to that. The animations in this game are all smooth, and despite the insane amount of combos available, each one appears to transition into each other in a completely natural way. Enemy animations are just as sensical and well executed. In the entirety of this game, I did not come across a single glitch, visual or otherwise. The fact that a properly polished product is what it takes to impress these days is a little sad, but when Capcom does it so well, fills me with a little hope for the future of the industry. Another critical aspect of every game is its characters. Devil May Cry is known for the lovable and eccentric Dante, but the fifth installment of this series has three playable characters: Dante, Nero, and V. Dante is exactly the same character he has always been, an overconfident badass with far too much time for killing demons. He's easily one of the best parts of the game, and interactions with him always left me satisfied and smiling. Nero was a character introduced in the fourth game of the series. He overacts most of his lines and he feels like one of the edgiest anime characters in history. However, this is mostly a minor complaint because overall, Nero is almost as enjoyable as Dante due to his personal vendetta and stakes in the story. Lastly, there's V, a mysterious character that was introduced in this game alongside his three demon minions, one of which is capable of speech. Between V and his bird demon, there's a charming character dynamic that's well explored. Yet, this game does have one rather sizable stylistic flaw. The environments are very repetitive. To my count, there were 3 consistent locales and around 4 unique ones across 20 missions. The 3 consistent ones being Messed Up City, Not Messed Up City, and Goopland. Goopland being the most plentiful of the environments. The 4 unique ones were the subway station, the final boss arena, and the 2 that will remain secret for story reasons. Additionally, most of the locations feel pretty drab, even if they are beautifully rendered. This is definitely one of those aspects of the game that is there for creating a specific environment and feel for the game, which it does rather well. But I still couldn't help but think that the oppressive atmosphere of the game was perhaps a little bit overbearing at times. The last thing I would like to complain about in this section is a specific side character, Nico. She's the game's primary merchant and is introduced shortly after the prologue, meaning she's there for the entire game. Her accent is annoying. She feels as if she's written by an edgy 14-year-old girl, and her delivery of her lines is somehow worse than the writing itself. Honestly, every moment where she was sharing screen time with the other characters felt like watching a clown with a Texas accent trying to play off of anime characters. Just let me say, it's rather unfortunate how accurate of a description that is. I'm sure there are some out there who would disagree with the sentiment, but I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of dread anytime there was an opening for her character to come into the scene, because she always ended up in the scene. Every time. The gameplay and combat system of the Devil May Cry series is perhaps the singularly most signature thing about this series. It's a unique mixture of brutality and the elegance that engages the players at every possible moment. Of course, the 5th installment in the series has innovated this formula to a certain extent by introducing more than one playable character, so I'm going to discuss them all individually first. Dante has been streamlined down a bit, but he still has the most combinations available, between 4 styles, over 9 weapons, plus Devil Trigger mode, as well as the ability you gain while progressing through the game. He's truly the most versatile and most enjoyable of the 3. Trickster style keeps combat fluid and hyper mobile with teleportation and quick dashes. It's great for bouncing between enemies and avoiding attacks. This is a style I found myself defaulting to. Swordmaster style is exceptional for melee damage output and has unique combos tied to each melee weapon. More often than not, you're going to be using swordsman to open up the defenses of enemies and counterattack, but this is also an excellent style to walk into any combat situation situation with. The gunslinger style is perfect for keeping distance and combo meter high and has distinctive capabilities for each ranged weapon. The goal with this style will obviously be boosting the damage capabilities of Dante's extensive gun collection, and is perfect for making short work of flying enemies. Lastly, the Royal Guard style is excellent for playing a little bit of defense and opening up tougher enemies to a solid counterattack. Personally, I didn't use this style very much during gameplay, but if you use it at the right situation or right moment, you can turn any fight around and give yourself some breathing room. Nero is the character you play the most and the one with the highest learning curve. His robotic arms called Devil Breakers are all diverse and unique. However, it would be a bold-faced lie to say that they're all useful all the time. There are a few generalist arms which will surely be your bread and butter, and few that exist only to be overcharged to access their secondary ability. The Devil Breakers are a unique way to provide extra abilities to gameplay. They all have a primary skill that is activated by pressing the O button on PS4 and a secondary that is activated by holding the O button. More often than not, the secondary ability is just an overpowered version of the original, although this isn't always the case, as seen with the Gerbera, which shoots a force out of it that launches Nero into the air with its primary and activates a giant high damage laser as a secondary. Activating the secondary will always destroy the Devil Breaker being used and change to the next one in the inventory. Being hit while a Devil Breaker is active will also consume it, and you can intentionally blow up a Devil Breaker to create a mid-range damage explosion and open up an area. The Devil Breaker economy is something you should always keep in mind, as there are many to pick up around the map, but you won't be able to select the ones you find. Lastly, the only way to switch Devil Breakers is to destroy them, which means you always want to get the most out of the ones you have before you move on to the next. Nero also has a grapple that can be used in combat to bring enemies closer and out of battle to pull himself into precarious positions. The devs do supply adequate amount of grapple-based puzzles for Nero levels as well, and they're more skill-based trials than they are puzzles per se. Both his sword and his gun have a charge up ability that is used for massive burst damage if timed correctly. These are both good for interrupting enemy attacks and stunning them, leaving them open to further combos. The issue with Nero is if you don't use his charge up abilities properly, it's challenging to do any meaningful damage and even more tough to rack up a decent combo meter. He also has the least amount of mobility options, which in a game where you have to juggle 24 enemies all at once is a major pitfall. Personally, I found Nero gameplay just differed enough from Dante gameplay to justify its existence. However, it was still the least enjoyable of all the playstyles for me. The last playable character was also the most refreshing. With any hack and slash game, the biggest issue is the repetition. Combat can get old quick when you're the most dominant fighter on the field. V flips this on its head a bit by making his demons the primary threat on the battlefield. They are targetable by enemies and have their own health bars. If they reach 0 HP, they go into a dormant state called stalemate, where they slowly recover and they heal faster when V is closer to it. But more often than not, you won't have to worry about them going into stalemate because they usually have immunity frames while attacking, which is a singular thing they do at nearly a constant rate. You still control them yourself. Griffin is a ranged demon in the shape of a bird of prey. His attacks are all ranged and have an electric motif. He can also talk and supplies a bit of witty commentary periodically during combat. Next is Shadow, a demon that takes the shape of a panther. His abilities are all melee based, and as such, he is at the most significant risk of going into stalemate despite his larger health pool. After purchasing a particular ability, V can also use Shadow as a ride to augment his mobility, but this is similar to the sprint ability of the other two characters and will likely be used almost exclusively out of combat. The final of the demons V controls is also the biggest bad boy on the block. Nightmare. He can be summoned only when V's devil trigger meter is full, and even then it's for an extremely brief time. While Nightmare is active, he deals copious amounts of damage. Summoning Nightmare is basically a free S rank button, one-shotting most weaker enemies and two-shotting most others. That's not entirely true though, because none of these demons can actually kill enemies. V has to finish the job with his cane, a unique mechanic that brings even more flavor to an already interesting character. All of the attacks of the demons have a fair AoE, and as such, V is relatively easy to play, but it's important to note that if you need to reposition V quickly, you'll have to take one of the demons out of the fight. You should always weigh your options heavily before retreating. As with the other games in the series, it's mechanically astounding, and all of the things discussed here merely scratch the surface of what this game has to show. Even the music changes with how well you're performing, which is an exciting addition to the game. Progression for all the characters is consistent enough to feel like you're growing more powerful as a character and more competent as a player, something to consider though. This many mechanics can be overwhelming to new players, and having to juggle between 3 characters' movesets could be confusing as well, especially when many of the abilities are just different enough to change the circumstances behind their usage between characters. Additionally, there are some moments in the game that feel like they lag behind the rest, long periods of nothing that get in the way of the full experience. There's a lot to digest from the gameplay standpoint, and you won't be able to experience everything Devil May Cry has to offer without multiple playthroughs. This isn't a bad thing, as they say, if a little is good, then more must be better. The story in this game is more just a frame to make things happen to the characters so they can get more stuff and fight more demons. It's not a marvel of storytelling. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's bad, it's just not part of the game that gets the most love. I will say that the recap movie that is available to watch on the main menu was very helpful as a reminder, and it provides an excellent way to ease new players into the setting. Ease might be a bit too soft of a word for this series. I suppose I could say lessen the world-shattering impact of the excess amounts of backstory at this point. Usually, I would say that you would have to have played at least one other DMC game before hopping into this one, but the intro movie is a more than adequate way to catch players up on the story. Most of the revelations in the story occur in cutscenes and are typically just explanations of the things that happen immediately before the events of the game, but for veterans of the DMC series, there are more than enough twists to keep them interested. From beginning to the end, the stakes feel like they're turned up to 11, which makes some of the more humorous and light moments in the game feel a little out of place. Most of the time, however, they're well integrated. It was also clear from the way the game ended that all these characters' stories are far from over, and Capcom may very well have some more Devil May Cry games in the store for players in the future. DMC 5 is a game that has had a lot of heart put into it. It's clear that from the voice acting to the cutscenes to the gameplay, the people at Capcom put more than their fair share into its creation. It's so polished and well made that other than the issues that are inherent in the hack and slash genre, you'd be hard pressed to find any real critical problems with this game. Nothing is broken or uncomfortable to play. Even the tedious parts of the game can be enjoyed to some extent. Not only is its replayability high, but I would also argue that replaying it is a crucial part of the experience. However, Nero being such a weak link in the gameplay is a little bit of a painful truth, especially when he is the first and last character you play in this game. With all that in mind, this game earns a Breakable program rating of 8 out of 10.